call the meeting to order. So we're here for our Metro Area Transit Coordinating Board Committee meeting for November 20th, 2019. And we'll begin with introductions, starting on my right.
Jackie Maas from Concordia College.
Jim Ossoff, City of Dilworth.
Deb White from City of Moorhead.
Tony Grenberg, Fargo City Commission.
Bert Stevens, NDSU.
Paul Grinland, Valley Senior Services.
Welcome. And we're currently waiting for our quorum, so we will begin with our informational items. Item 3A, update on Linked FM Fargo public hearing and public comments. Lori, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Matt Peterson's out sick today, but I did attend both of those meetings, so I can certainly provide some comments. It was interesting. We, at the public informational meeting that we held at the GTC, we had about 6 people submit comments. All of them were in favor of continuing Link FM. And a couple of the comments I thought were also very interesting and were thought-provoking were, if Link FM were to be discontinued, is there a way that some of the other routes could pick up some of those pieces and make it almost work the same? Especially Moorhead Route 4, which is Moorhead shopping route. If it could come into Fargo and pick up a piece of the link, then there would be a 30-minute frequency in and out of the downtowns, and additional bus stops would be needed to do that. But that was one of the recommendations. There were several comments from people that could the revenue that has been steered towards Link FM be put into some kind of Sunday service. Sunday service was on our 5-year plan as one of the most asked for items that people wanted, because we have no service for the fixed routes on Sundays now. Another comment was they did like the option of if Link could work Thursday, Friday, Saturday, because then it would serve the events that we know we add extra buses for, like Street Fair, but it could also provide service to other events that people take Link FM to in the evenings and weekends that are happening downtown that we don't put extra buses on. And the other idea that person had too, that we had thought about too, was shifting the hours. If it's no longer a commuter service for people working downtown to park at the Moorhead Center Mall and was more aimed towards entertainment Thursday, Friday, Saturday, could we shift the hours to start from 9 and go till 9 at night, or from 10 till 10 at night, so that people in downtown could shop and then eat out and maybe do some of the entertainment at the theater and things like that as well. So those were really good comments, I thought. The Fargo Commission meeting, we had only one comment at the Fargo Commission meeting, and there was a small discussion. There was no decision made by the commissioners. They asked it to be brought back on December 2nd with some price options. One of the things that they talked about was what would it cost if a smaller bus was put on Link FM. So I did, we are working on price changes for a smaller bus versus a larger bus for if we did like a Thursday through Saturday daily service. We'd have to put the big buses on for the big events, but for the daily route, that would be a little bit less costly to operate because of fuel specifically. Driver costs would be the same, but fuel costs would be less on a smaller vehicle. Jordan, any other comments that you got that you want to share? Well, that's what we wanted to share. So December 2nd, Fargo Commission sees this again, and then December 9th is Moorhead's public hearing. And Moorhead on November 12th did meet on this subject, and they were interested in continuing Link in some form or another. They do think it's an important economic development piece, and there was a note that there's more things coming to downtown Moorhead that people are going to want to go between the downtowns to see. So there's things coming. So that was an important piece. So hopefully, those upcoming meetings will have some decisions made and be able to know what we're doing for operations in January. And Moorhead did talk about, operating events service in Moorhead only if Fargo didn't participate in that. For our Yumcomb Center and for our Trollwood Performing Arts at Blue Stem, that we would do some service like that. It does require approval by the Federal Charter Ombudsman, and we did send a request to the Federal Charter Ombudsman. It's a hard word to say. because of the fact that it is not a regular route running day in, day out. It's for special events. We have to make sure that we are not considered to be competing with private charter businesses. So we're waiting for an opinion from them on that, and hopefully we'll have it before these meetings that are coming up in December. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, or, Tony, if you've got anything you want to add from the meetings, then I'd be happy.
No, you summarized it pretty well, thank you. I think there was also a point or two made about, I think it was Commissioner Pepcorn, about, specific events as part of the overall ongoing, rather than a continual day-to-day operation. And so I think
Yes.
that was one of the points made as well. So.
Yes, and we'll bring back cost prices to the commission for that, for their consideration.
Other questions or comments? Lori, I was wondering, for the public comments that you gathered, will you make those available to us? And I also was wondering if we could share that so that the other council members in Moorhead could see those. And I'm assuming maybe commissioners, that they've probably already gotten them. But I think that would be helpful. And as you mentioned, we'll have our public hearing as well. But I think, riders are going on both sides of the river, so I think it would benefit the Moorhead council members to be able to see what you received in the public hearing here as well.
Yes, we did put, any of the comments that we have received have been put into our feedback software that we have, and we printed out a copy and handed those out at the Fargo City Commission meeting. We will do the same for Moorhead, add any comments we've received since then, and a summary of that, so that you can, if you don't want to read through 24 pages of comments, there'll be some summaries of what we saw coming out of those comments that was consistently the same from various people. So we will pass that along.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then moving on to item 3B, update on driver recruitment. Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, don't drop my tea.
Right. Good morning. I'm just looking at these notes here. So as of July, we had 11. We now have 4 open jobs. Recruitment continues. Can't thank you guys enough for your collective efforts to increase the wages, because it's the singular most important reason why we're able to run the service the way it's intended. I think we have 3 people scheduled for class on Monday, so we intend to close that gap by at least December 1st-ish. So, any questions?
I saw you had, is it one that's a cadet? Is that what, or I can't remember what the phrase was, but is that, what's the timeline between that?
It's usually about 3 weeks.
Okay,
3 weeks, you go classroom training, then you have behind the wheel, then you have cadetting training.
okay. Great,
How long do they cadet?
They cadet for 36 hours.
okay.
So, yeah, 8 full shifts.
And if you are successful with all of the folks that you have here, you said you'll still have 5 more openings.
No, we have 4 currently now, 3
Okay.
scheduled for class.
Okay,
Yeah,
So we're going to be down to 1 if the 3 didn't
1
come
job,
through.
down from 26 when I came here in June. So, but that's not me. I just managed. You guys did the weights. So,
and just to give an idea of the change, do you have a sense of, do you recall where we were at a year ago?
I wasn't here a year ago.
I was looking at Lori.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I don't. Sorry, I don't.
But more openings than we have now, right?
Oh, by far, yes. Yes, it's much improved.
I know, Mr. Rivera, you're getting ready for your first winter in the Fargo Moorhead
I
area,
am.
so.
Yes, I'm gearing up
Yes.
for it. I'm growing a beard just in preparation.
A plaid shirt.
And a plaid shirt,
yeah,
yes.
Yep.
Turned into a lumberjack.
It's a dry cold here.
Right.
Right.
We'll see. It's all right. If I were
Right.
a roofer, I might be more concerned, but
Right,
I'm in office, so it's not a problem.
right. Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, item 3C, update on transit authority study. Michael Maddox.
Sorry, I wrangling
There's our vote.
another person to be on the board
Yay.
as an alternate.
Yes, there you go.
I'm guessing this is yours as well. I'll wait till Laura. All right, good. We have a quorum now. Good morning, everybody. It is once again time for MapBus to update its transit development plan. It's interesting, this was the first project that I worked on when I came to MetroCog, and now, almost 5 years later, I'm project manager again. So we've prepared a draft RFP where you can find in your packet. The RFP covers a number of topics. I'll just briefly go through some of the scope of work items that are included in this plan. MetroCog, through its Unified Planning Work Program, has set aside $200,000 for this study. We think that that's a fairly good number to get us through this project. That would be 80% locally, or 80% federally funded, 20% locally funded, with the match being comprised from the city of Fargo and the city of Moorhead based upon their cost split agreement. We plan to take this in front of our policy board at tomorrow's meeting, actually, for approval and then a subsequent release through NDDOT. But some of the scope items in here are not necessary, are fairly kind of ubiquitous for transit development plans. However, there's a couple of things in here that are very particular to what's going on with the transit system in the Fargo-Moorhead area. And so, kind of with the last TDP, our consultants came to the conclusion that we've really studied the efficiency of our transportation or our transit system ad nauseum. In fact, some of the recommendations of route changes in that plan were kind of going back to things that we had done in the past. There was a couple of route reorganizations that were fairly major, but still some of the still see some of the problems with the hub and spoke network in our area, being that it takes a long time to get from one side of the community to the other side of the community. And so we really wanted to have an analysis of different types of route scenarios or services in this plan that could maybe make those trips a little bit shorter. So more increased more increased service on certain corridors that would kind of be express service. We kind of did that solidified that as Route 15 in the last TDP. And so 15-minute service back and forth from GTC to West Acres Mall. And hopefully, we can expand that concept or maybe integrate some arterial service concepts through this TDP. We also included a stop analysis. MapBus recently, after many years of formulating their policy, have implemented formalized stops instead of flag stops. So we wanted to go through analysis of where those stops are located and what the efficiency of them are, and then kind of what the production of those stops are, so we can maybe add or subtract some stops, reorganize them. There are a number of performance measure things that we're required to do that we weren't required to do in the last plan. More robust transit asset management, and then also looking at safety performance measures as kind of a new topic on the streets right now. And then also we will be leading MapBus through a goal setting and visioning process through the TDP, whereby we set kind of a MapBus oriented mission statement. Right now they have a number of goals. What do you call them, Lori? Your core principles? The 9 core values. Yeah, the 9 core values. However, each side of the river, as you know, operates, they operate in tandem, but they also operate separately, and there's no one unified mission statement for both. And so we hope to institute that with this plan. As you know, we're going through a transit authority study right now, and we hope to integrate some of those. I just realized that I jumped topics here, but oh well. We're going through the transit authority study right now, and we hope to integrate some of the findings of that plan into this RFP, or into the planning effort, as it were. Some of those will be organizational structure. We just had a meeting with our consultant on Tuesday talking about some of the concepts and some of the feedback that we've heard through the initial stakeholder interviews. And so we're hoping to address some of those issues that we have found through structural change within the organization, and hopefully that will be integrated into the TDP for implementation within this 5-year cycle. So I apologize for skipping. If we can just, since we do have a quorum, just go to 2.
I was going to suggest that, right? Why don't we blend right into 2C, draft RFP for.
So
since we're
so
kind of
many
talking-
studies that
Yes.
I have, I get punch drunk.
So 2C, draft RFP for 5-year transit development plan.
So that's my report for the transit development plan. We are looking for favorable action for recommendation
Move for
to,
approval.
All right, questions or comments? Michael, I had a couple of questions and comments. One, I wanted to say I really commend whoever worked on the RFP. I really like the strong emphasis on community engagement, and that you're looking for them to do it in creative ways. And one thing I wanted to mention that, when you see the ideas that they come up with, one thing that we saw in Moorhead that I really liked with one of the groups that we brought in is they, in some of the public meetings that we had, they really took to heart making something child-friendly. And in particular with this, if we want people to be able to come to it and not have to worry about getting a babysitter or, having screaming kids next to you. So as you're looking at some of the proposals, if they do have things, or even just encouraging them to have some things where they could bring their kids, and the one in Moorhead, they just had some different fun kid activities that the kids could actually be involved with the process as well, but it also kept them occupied so that the parents could be fully engaged. So
sure, yeah. We are kind of experimenting with a active public engagement policy at MetroCog and actually going out into the community to do our public outreach rather than just holding public meetings. We are required to hold public meetings, but we see that soliciting feedback from residents is easier when you go where they are. And this summer, or this last summer and the summer before, we did this with the MTP, and we did have, bubble wands and things for the kids to play with while the parents were completing surveys. So I do appreciate your comment there.
And then my other question was about on page 19, they're going to be giving updates, and from the material, it said they'll give updates to city staff, and then will that come back to your staff? Will that come back to us, or will they actually come and present? Would we have the opportunity to have them at some of our meetings where we might be able to ask them some questions?
Yeah, so right now in the proposed scope of work in the RFP, we included 2 presentations to the MAC coordinating board, one at the middle of the project and then one at the end of the project. Of course, you are all always invited to any of our public meetings, and so we will make sure to push those notifications out specifically to this board. But particularly those 2 presentations in the middle of the process to give you an update and to give you time to chew on some of the things that are working on, and at the end to get your final approval.
Other questions or comments? Okay, before we have you leave, since you're there, is there anything else that you wanted to say regarding the informational item on the
authority study?
Right.
That's a good question. We're formulating an approach to, after this initial stakeholder round, how we're going to move forward with the project. The consultant has relayed some concerns that some of the issues are fairly daunting and may not be able to be overcome, and we've relayed back to them. I think they're just kind of getting scared. We're at the beginning of this issue, kind of getting all the issues from people, and they're hearing these issues and wondering how they're going to address all of them. But what we have denoted to them is they don't need to address each individual issue. They need to address the arena in which those issues are being caused. And so there are a number of issues in, like, for instance, in decision making, because MapBus is not one singular organization. They're run by their departments within each of the city, and sometimes decision making like you, a good instance that we've been using is this Link FM discussion, where, you know, there was a little bit of disagreement on either side of the river on the continuance of that individual program. So we're trying to streamline decision-making and organizational structure so these issues aren't popping up and their staff are dealing with them instead of operating the system.
Michael, I'm wondering, you know, as we move closer to 2020 and the area being defined as more of a overall, what do you call it, metropolitan area,
Yeah, transportation management.
transit management area.
Yeah.
How does this play into that? Will there be much back play, back and forth on that in consideration, or?
Sure, yeah, there's actually two tiers of the study. One is looking at organizational structure and decision-making, and the other one is looking at finance. Our finances will be somewhat impacted by this region's designation as a TMA through the census efforts that are coming next year. On the Minnesota side of the river, those impacts are not felt as much as in North Dakota because they're funded a lot more through state dollars than the North Dakota side. Right now, I believe the consultants that came up with about $800,000 to $1.2 million shortfall in federal funds, given the TMA status, which that's just for current operations. So if we look at anything in the future, obviously that expands as we expand transit service to our burgeoning community. So right now we're still going through those financial steps. We've got some of that, you know, this is how we operate currently. This is the current deficit that we could realize. And now we're trying to work through in the future, what kind of deficits are we looking if we want to institute some of the ideas within the transit development plan, like later night service and then Sunday service, which are fairly big ticket items in the transit world, those operations. And then looking at revenue sources that can be local revenue sources that can be brought to bear in order to fund both current operations and possible future operations to fill that gap. So the idea of an authority, a taxing authority, was one of those ideas, but there are many other ideas that the consultants are looking at as well. And whether that occurs on the North Dakota side or the Minnesota side or both, that's yet to be seen. We're too early in the study to answer those questions.
They will be evaluated and discussed at length within the study.
Correct, and any recommendations or, you know, any further guidance that we need will be brought forward to this body. So we're hoping, I think, to be done with this study around the springtime, so April timeframe. Any further questions?
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank
Then,
you.
since we have a quorum, let's move back up to our action items. So we'll move to item 2A. In our packet, you had minutes from July 17th and October 2nd. And I hope you had a chance to review them, and I'll entertain a motion to approve when you're ready.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Jim, is there a second?
Second.
Sarah Watson Curry? Okay, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? Motion carries. Okay. Item 2B, 2020 meeting dates and topics. Lori, do you have something on that?
Yes, as you may recall, we meet every other month at 8 o'clock, and there are some conflicting transit conferences and things, and some of those meetings had to be changed. And so we're proposing these dates that are in front of you, and hoping that these will meet with your approval so that we can get them on everyone's schedule and get moving forward. The list of topics underneath are those things that we know are done on a regular basis, usually during those meetings, so that you can see the important things that will be coming up under each of those meetings so that we can get all the action done that we need to get done for this body to recommend to the Commission and Council.
All right, questions? Sarah?
My only clarifying question would be, is location determined already? Are you going to be hosted here at Fargo City Hall again?
Yes, we did check, and it is available on those dates. One of the dates was adjusted, actually, because it wasn't available. So, yes.
Any other questions or comments? And so you need us to vote on approving this, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the 2020 meeting dates and topics?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign? Okay, motion carries. And we've already covered 2C, so we'll move down to our draft survey to college students.
We didn't take any action on 2C?
Oh, you're right, I'm sorry, we didn't. Yes, thank you. Thank you very, I'm sorry we skipped that. Yes, so.
Move for approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, on item 2C, just to make sure everyone knows. And any further discussion? If none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, so moving down to 2D, draft survey to college students.
Good morning. I'm Taryn Hake, Assistant Transit Planner and Marketing Specialist for the Moorhead side. Apologize, my throat is a little hoarse this morning. So for those of you who are at the last meeting, Lori had spoke about our declining college ridership and some of the action items that we had come up with to address this issue. The first step was really just gathering information. So we created this college ridership survey. The main goals were to really assess the perception of the service from both riders and non-riders. We wanted to get insight about the travel patterns of the people who were riding, and then really just kind of as a bonus, learn about how effective our communication methods were and where they were seeing our marketing efforts, our communication, and how the partnership with the schools was going as far as how the schools were distributing information about MapBus as well. Excuse me. So the survey that you should have received as an email, it's going to be created in Constant Contact, just an email distribution system, and we will link it to the UPass page on our MapBus website. That way, when we're distributing this link, we can direct them through the MapBus website and kind of encourage additional browsing, learning more about MapBus services. Ideally, we'd like to get buy-in from all of our UPass schools and have them distribute it to their student body. And then, the more data we get, the better. Excuse me. So as an incentive, we're going to be doing, so sorry. We're going to be doing a drawing from those participants who enter their email as part of the process. We're going to be giving away multiple small value gift cards to coffee shops, Starbucks and Caribou. And there will be the option to add your email at the end if you want to participate in that drawing. The survey should take less than 10 minutes to complete for those who do it. I took it as a sample study. It took me about 6.5 minutes, so allowing more time for contemplation if you need it. As far as timeline goes, we would like to get it distributed as soon as possible, really making sure that we can grab that student attention before we get into finals weeks and then leaving for the holidays. Once we have our results, we would share those with the colleges, see if there's any areas we can work together to improve. With the Constant Contact program, we can filter the results per college. So we can filter by that first question, so we can see the answers for everybody who chose that they go to NDSU or Concordia. Then that will help us really identify those individual trends with the campuses. So that's all I have for an update. I'd be happy to hear any questions or suggestions you guys might have.
Sarah Watson-Curry?
I always have a question. Taryn, I love that you have a little bit of an incentive. That was one of the things that I was going to ask about, so kudos on that. Two things that I had thought about, and I know you don't want to add length. I appreciate that there's the question about asking if they have a bike with them at school and identifying that they can bring it on the bus. But I was curious if there's any way you want to capture information about the other alternatives they choose. Do they, like what their preferences would be? Do they prefer to, carpool, bike, walk, whatever it might be? And then I also thought there's some seasonality about it too. I myself find using the bus when it's more inclement weather and will opt to walk or pedal somewhere if I have that option. So I don't know if that's something that people would want to explore just to capture a little bit more data on that. So those are my only suggestions. But otherwise, I think the survey is really thorough and appreciate all the efforts on it.
Yeah, thank you. We'll definitely look into those 2 suggestions.
Other questions?
I have a question or more of a comment, I guess. I'm curious about your the timeline for putting this out to students. Like, is there a reason why you're hoping to get it done this semester? Or I'm just thinking about, I know at Concordia right now, a lot of students are really bogged down. So especially if you put it out, I mean, next week is Thanksgiving and then we have 2 weeks and school's done. So I just could see your participation being low if we release it in even, this week or next. So I'm just curious if there is a possibility of pushing out or if you have a deadline for something.
We didn't have a particular deadline. I think the issue was more about trying to address the declining ridership as soon as we can, and this being really one of those first steps that we'd identified. So kind of the sooner that we can get that data, the sooner we can analyze it and start working towards solutions based off of that information. We had been working with Natalie Reinhardt, and I know that she was going to kind of look into a timeline that would be appropriate for Concordia. So if there are certain concerns with certain schools about whether the timeline would be appropriate, we can certainly communicate with those schools about that. Since ideally the schools will be distributing it on their own, and it won't be just a random email from Matt Bus, more of a trusted source. Thanks. Mm-hmm.
I'll just add to that too. I think having it completed by the end of the year would be very difficult, because I think next week we're going into Thanksgiving, and I teach at Minnesota State Moorhead, and I think anytime between Thanksgiving and finals, you're just not gonna, your students are gonna be busy with other things. And so, I think if there was a way that you could extend it out over the break even, and that maybe while they're gone, they could get a chance to be able to do it, since it is an online survey. Mm-hmm. So even if they're not in the area, if they've gone home, they could still have the opportunity to fill it out. The other thing I appreciate too that you have incentives, and then I would say if there's a way that you can send this out in multiple reminders and have weekly incentives, things like that. So this happens to be my area that I do survey research. So So if there's something where you do weekly drawings for people who've completed it, but just keep it on their radar so that if they haven't done it this week, they could see it next week. They get that reminder that could help increase the response rate. The other issue that I'll bring up is if you do work with the schools, one of the things that we've encountered with online surveys is that if the schools simply send it out to the students through their university email address, which is the student's official email address, many students now don't use those or rarely ever check it. They'll use their Gmail rather than that. And so if there's other ways that that you can get the word out besides having it go to their official email address, and just know that that's been an ongoing discussion of how do we reach students when they're not regularly checking those official email accounts.
Yes, I believe that we were also going to be sending survey reminders and links out through social media accounts. There's also the possibility of us sending out our rider alerts that go out to our major rider base as well. The focus with having the schools distribute the information as well was wanting to try and make sure that the survey takers were in fact college students, and trying to hone in on that distribution a little bit more. But yes, with the first question being what school do you attend, that helps weed it out as well though. So we'll distribute through our normal methods too.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, and so you are looking for our support for your draft survey?
Yep, basically just the recommendation to move forward with distribution.
Okay. Is there a motion to recommend that they move forward with the draft survey?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Jim, is there a second?
Second.
Need more coffee up here. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. All right, we will move back down to our remaining informational items. So we will be on item 2D, approved state of Minnesota grants. Lori gets to share good news. So.
It is good news. So the state, Moorhead put in 2 operating grants for 2020, 2021. It's a 2-year grant cycle for the first time through MnDOT. And they fully funded both of our grant applications, which is wonderful news for operating. And then they had 2 other solicitations for capital projects and vehicle replacements. And the state of Minnesota selected all of our 2020 capital projects that were non-vehicle to be funded with state money rather than federal money. And we do have a federal appropriation that is available to Moorhead. That appropriation is good for 6 years. So by the state of Minnesota choosing to fund them with state funds, that then frees up that money for larger projects. So again, we can save it up to 6 years. We have some facility improvements that we're looking at. And so we could continue to have that money on the books for those improvements, like the Metro Transit Garage. When we did our facility study on that, showed a need for some improvements being phased in, and so it's good to have those funds on the book. So the 2020 budget, these are in the city of Moorhead's mass transit budget, these projects. It's just a change in funding sources from federal to state, but they are funding the green light signal priority project, the Dilworth bus stop improvements, the upgrades to some shelters, including the Metro Transit Garage lighting project, and some updates to our facility at the garage, and replacing the shelter at the courthouse. The projects beyond 2020 for capital are only they're placeholders at this time for the transit plan that has to be put in for the state local transit plan, but they aren't necessarily finalized for any year beyond 2020 for those capital projects. So even though they have selected one of our 2023 projects, we don't know at this time if that will be funded with that source of funding. It could be that they pick another source of funding. On the vehicles that they've selected, one of the things the state of Minnesota wanted to do in this solicitation was to replace many of the rural vehicles that had far surpassed their lifespan. And in doing so, they put most of their resources first towards the rural systems, and they changed the funding to be 90-10, so 90% federal or state and 10% local money. So then they went to the larger urban areas and looked at their project selection. So they again have selected state funding rather than federal funding for most of our vehicles. I have come back to them with some questions on that because in federal funding, we have pre-award authority. So we can order the bus a year in advance because it takes a year to build a large bus. And so if we have to wait until we have a contract in place with the state of Minnesota, it's actually making these buses late for replacement, and we will far exceed our 500,000-mile life on them. So my question I sent back to the state was, can we start at the state fiscal year in like June or July 1st, rather than the calendar year, so that we have that pre-award, so we can order that bus earlier and not have to worry about the bus needing a new engine or some major component, or having to be parked because we can't run it anymore. So that was my only concern on the vehicles. Very excited about the 90-10 funding versus 85-15, which we had for our vehicle replacement, so that lowers the local share. Definitely don't want to upset the apple cart on 90-10 funding. It was just a question to see if they could adjust that. So that's where we are with the funding. They have funded everything we put in. They just shifted them around a little bit year-wise on the vehicle replacements. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on that.
Questions, comments? No? Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
All right, and our last informational item, September and October 2019 operations reports and college ridership. So Matt, you said Matt's out.
Matt's out
so
sick, yeah. Okay, so you have many pages in this one. You may have noticed a big change in the operations report. Matt has been working on a really large spreadsheet that brings in all kinds of data, and then working on what reports you'd like to see. So there are lots of reports in here. I think what we'd like to do is know whether or not you find these helpful. Or if you'd like to see less information, more comparison information. I think it's important that that we show you what we have for statistics, but also ask for your input. So going through the graphs, Matt felt that graphs were easier to understand than at a glance than large numbers, but because our transit system has varying levels for paratransit, Moorhead and Fargo, those lines aren't close to each other necessarily either. So it's hard to see, like on paratransit, since it's just a small amount of the system ridership, how that's doing on these graphs. So he's done he's done them all together, but whether or not you find that helpful would be something that we would ask you. The ridership for the year, comparing 2018 to 2019 by month, you can see how ridership drops in the summertime when the college students are not all here, how it increases in the wintertime due to the bad cold temperatures and winter conditions, and just give you an overall view of how ridership is going. And it is going, it has been trending down this year versus last year. Again, we're working on some of that data so that we can see why it's trending down, and trying to improve our marketing and educational pieces to encourage people to ride the bus. So as I'm going along, if you want to comment on some of these, whether you like them or not, I mean, feel free to do that. It's kind of a lot to go over and then go back. So do you like the graphs in general? Yes? Deb says yes? Okay. Good. The vehicle revenue hours, different holidays fall on different days, and so revenue hours are adjusted based on that. It helps us to compute the rides per revenue hour, which is a statistic that we look at to see how our ridership isn't related to the service that's on the streets. So revenue hours are basically changing because of when a holiday falls on a weekend or on a Sunday versus a weekday. We have not changed our service levels beyond that in 19 to any degree, except for to add tap ride in August. And so, August, you might see some changes because of the tap ride addition in the industrial park. Otherwise, it's just revenue hour levels have been fairly steady in 19, and a little bit, not much of a difference from 18. Vehicle revenue miles, that's not a statistic necessarily that probably means a lot to you, but it is one that we are required to track for federal grant purposes. And it shows, really how many miles we are traveling on the streets and putting on the buses. And we are putting more on the buses this year than we were last year. So I don't know why that is other than holidays. Lots of detours, so they affect mileage too. Let's see what we have. Rides per hour on a fixed route. Our average across the whole system is 14 rides per hour, or at least it was third quarter, but that's summer, so that's the lower of the ridership data. But as you can see here, it goes up in the wintertime. So some of our routes are doing up to 20 rides average across the whole system. NDSU is much higher than that, and we have routes that are producing higher and some that are lower. So this is the average of across the system. And then rides per hour on paratransit have stayed fairly steady. Paratransit rides, revenue hours are adjusted to pay on demand. So, the more requests we get, the more service we put on the street. That we have to meet demand under federal regulation, and so it just adjusts and goes with the flow of what people need. And it has been fairly steady even in the summertime. So, I think a lot of people with disabilities in general are more able to travel because the weather's good in the summer, and so we'll see a lot more travel in the summer than we do in the winter. But a lot of people are also conditionally eligible and only can ride in the winter. And so we have a group of people that ride more because they can get around more, and then we have a group of people that transfer over to the fixed route system during the summer because they're not eligible for paratransit, and then come back on the system in the winter. Okay, so fixed route rides per hour, we've talked about that. Paratransit rides per hour. Calls into our call centers. You know, part of our calls into our call center is how good is our website, how good is our materials that are out there, and the things that we have on our tape recording to tell people things so that they don't have to talk to a dispatcher. You know, they can just call into our call center and it gives you certain information, and you can push buttons to get to different lines. So our number of calls has been going down this year, and we feel that that's a good thing. It's not necessarily because of ridership, but more because our webpage is improved and people can get information. I think that way better. And you can see that reflected in the social media, because our social media is going up. People are looking at the social media and getting information that way. And Taryn and Cole have done a really wonderful job of getting out the social media messages of what we're doing with MapBus. On a weekly basis, they get 2 or 3 messages out on, you know, what are we doing for activities and public hearings and special fare promotions and things like that. So senior ride ridership, this is for the Metro Senior Ride Moorhead-Dilworth piece of the system. Ridership has been down on senior ride this year as well. And I was told that that is due to a number of people who were regular riders who have passed away. And so they are increasing the marketing on senior ride as well to make sure that we get some new clients out there aware that it's available. So I know that Senior Ride also got some software for dispatching and are working with that new software too. And Paul, do you have anything you want to add on that?
No, being implemented now, they're doing training. They're using the training module. I guess I had a question about that in your budget approval. Was that a specific item in your budget approval, the dispatch software for Senior Ride?
No, we talked about that at a previous meeting when Brian was here and you weren't here, but it wasn't procured. If it was procured following the federal rules, then we can look at funding our portion of that software. Maintenance-wise, if you put it in your budget, because you submitted the budget for 2020 and 2021, if it was submitted in that budget was fully approved.
Thank you.
So, okay, now the black and white pages are really overwhelming to me because look, you get every route we've got going on. And so you can see all of the different 30 series routes for NDSU, how they're doing month to month, and so there's some real data there if you're interested in that level of data. Because this is just 2019's data, you can't see the comparison, but we have another page further on in the packet that does the comparison of 19 to 18 on routes so that you can see how individual routes are doing. And so, yeah, that's a lot of data, as are revenue hours and revenue miles. So basically, all that data is used to come up with those graphs and to come up with other things that we have. Do you want that level of data in your packet? I see Britt saying yes. Okay, great. We certainly can give it to you because it's there and we have it. So then as you get further into the operations report, you have the 19 versus 18 and the change by month between Moorhead, Fargo, NDSU, and paratransit service levels, and what that change was and what the percentage is by city, so that you can see how ridership is doing in general, not by route, but in general. So Moorhead's ridership change, for example, for the month of January was down 0.05%. So you know it's down 22% for the year, but that's kind of skewed by the fact that November and December data isn't in here yet. So yeah, I think that bottom number is actually incorrect. because it's looking at 2018 and 0 for 2019, and because 2019 hasn't been entered yet. So there'll be some adjustments we're going to need to do to that final number on these reports so that you can see year-to-date what's really occurring between the systems. So definitely got to change that. So again, vehicle hours and miles and everything, we have a similar data for that. We are still putting together the college ridership separately so that you can see on each of the participants in UPass how the ridership is going. So the college ridership on MatBus is still being tallied by college, by month, and by academic year. And again, this report doesn't have the totals for at the bottom percent change, because you have to take out all the months that are 0% and take them away so that you can really see what's happening year to date. So that's another thing that we'll have to correct on this report. But the college ridership by college, Concordia has been flying high and doing really well, and ridership is high at Concordia. Thank you for all your efforts at the college to get that information out to your students, and it's good to see that up. M-State and MSUM and NDSU and NDSCS ridership has been down. And again, why we're trying to get a handle on that with our survey. I did put in here the Metro Senior Ride statistics so you can see how 2019 versus 2018 is doing by city between Moorhead and Dilworth. And ridership is been down in Moorhead, but up in Dilworth considerably. They had a 30% increase year to date. And October, it was an increase of 76%. So yeah, they're increasing their usage in Dilworth considerably on Senior Ride. On the whole, Senior Ride has been pretty steady since we started it in 2008, and if it hasn't been going up, it's been pretty steady. So it's nice to see that continue that way. Okay, that's a lot. So that was ridership. So do you want to see all those ridership reports each time we meet? Yes. Okay. Sounds.
And Laura, I'll make a comment. One of the
Yes.
ones that I appreciated is the missed trip report.
Oh yeah, I was just going to go into that. Yeah.
Yes, and actually, I was really glad that Lisa Bodie was here today, because Lisa leads all of our work with our legislators, and I noticed a very high number of times that the reason for the missed trip report was because of trains. And so I think if that's another place where we can capture that information and use it in some of the information we're gathering to justify why we need another underpass, that would be beneficial. So, so just even if you're putting it in there in the monthly packets, it's a reminder to us of some of the valuable information that we have that we might even be using in other places as well. So I'm a data person. I appreciate it. So
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, and we have a few driver error, dispatch errors. Someone on shift came in at the wrong time or took the wrong bus, or things that affect the system. A lot of that has to do with new drivers and new dispatchers. So I know Joseph's working on that to correct those issues. And they get fined for those, so they don't want to have to pay those fines. So that's a good thing that they'll work hard to fix those kinds of issues. And then weather, we've had bad weather later in the year, we had a snowstorm already in October, and the weather affected our missed trips. It's like, that is highly unusual. And we had snowstorms in April last year, so you were having more missed trips for weather, where we can't control. The traffic has to move slower and such. But yeah, missed trips is important data for us to see how a route is performing and what's causing the route to be off of timing, because it means that an entire 30-minute trip or a half a trip was missed before it's recorded. So it's a big effect on the system's performance. Our feedback operations is our complaint system, and so or complement system. So when someone calls in for feedback and we put them into the system, we try to get those completed within 10 working days. And so all of our stop requests, we are on a designated bus stop system now starting last October. And so if someone wants to request a bus stop for consideration, we have them put that through feedback, and then we evaluate it and put that in. So you'll see a number of bus stop requests that are in here. We also put our public hearing comments in here, so when we were open for comments for Link FM, every comment we received, including the informational meeting, was entered into feedback, so that we could print those off and supply those to you during your meetings. And so that's also something that we like to do. So, yeah, you can see what the issues are, you know, if they're behind schedule, ahead of schedule, if they feel that there was some unsafe driving, maybe someone complained that a bus cut them off, or ran a red light, or something like that. We do investigate those, and First Transit investigates those that involve with drivers, and administration staff investigates those that are involved with routes, bus stops, and things that we control. And so there's quite a bit of them, as you can see. We had a lot of entry so far this year, because I believe this is the whole year, 159 for this period of time. So, and then the collision report. Yeah, the only thing I do notice when I look at this is that you can't see how that compares to last year, you know, with the collision report. How many accidents have we had this year versus last year? Or this is just September and October's report for collisions. You know, how does that compare? So I personally would like to see that comparison of data put in there. So I, of course, get that level of data, but you don't, and I think it's important that you see how that's going. We do have an accident review committee who meets and consists of First Transit and Fargo staff and Moran staff, and that review each collision to determine if it was preventable or non-preventable for assessing fines for First Transit, and also to determine if there's some retraining needed for drivers to make sure that that's corrected behavior. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if you have more data you would like to ask for, or more less data, or more comparison data.
Okay, so first, Sarah, or Ricky? Okay.
I have three things I'd like to touch on. It is an overwhelming amount of data, but I think it depends on what we're talking about too. It is nice to reference them. I have different questions that come up, so I appreciate that. One comment, and I know you have this level of data, and I'm sure in our studies we do too, we've talked about the overall, it's consistent too. The ridership has been down in 2019, but I just wanted to know, is it comparable to any previous years, or just looking at a 2-year snapshot is, I don't feel like we're getting the full picture there. So that was just one question I had. And
do that. Yep.
It doesn't have to be here. I know we're studying it too. I like seeing the feedback too, and I think it gives us a better picture about what, you know, our drivers and users are seeing for things that they love about the service, you know, areas of improvement. I like that there's compliments in there too. So I really appreciate seeing that spelled out a little bit more instead of just kind of categorized. And then,
if I might note too, when it says substantiated or unsubstantiated, a lot of the complaints that are unsubstantiated are the bus driver drove right by me, and we can pull up the video and see that that person wasn't at the bus stop as that bus went by.
Yeah.
So those are some of those unsubstantiated.
Exactly. And then I just had a clarifying question about with the penalties that are imposed, particularly in the collision reports. How is that managed for the drivers? You know, a $500 fine. You know, the largest one is $3,000. How is that imposed so we're not, you know, negatively affecting our employees, you know, day to day or month to month, you know, economic planning?
So there's a couple of things. The First Transit contract has the minimum fee for preventable is $500 and the maximum is $5,000. It's usually based on the how bad the accident is and how much it costs to repair the vehicles. Fargo, their insurance is a $10,000 deductible, and so a lot of this is used to cover the deductible for the correction of for the damage, because it would be their fault, our fault, and we insure the buses. The drivers themselves are only affected as far as their safety bonuses go. We have monthly safety bonuses and quarterly safety bonuses, and so if they had a preventable accident, they would not receive their monthly safety bonus or their quarterly, but then it starts over again the next month, so you have an opportunity to show that you can improve your driving and get that monthly one. And we used to have an annual bonus, and you had to make it through all 12 months to get an annual safety bonus. We broke that into quarterly so that people could see improvement and not feel like they'd lost their opportunity to get that bonus. And I don't know, Joseph, if there's anything else.
No, I just didn't understand it, so thank you for.
Yeah, no,
eliminating
it's
that.
just that, it's part of our request for proposals for driver services. They know up front that there will be penalties involved. And so it's an incentive to do a really good training program and retraining of the drivers. And they get DriveCam, which is the computer system on board that tells them that someone braked too hard or hit a curb, or, you know, it's a evaluation system that they can use for retraining. So they get emails from that DriveCam system. It's owned by First Transit to coach drivers as they go along, especially new drivers, you know, and then they're first handling a large bus in service. What kinds of things do they need to brake sooner, or, you know, they're following too close, things like that are gauged as well. So hopefully all that improves so they don't have to pay any penalties. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I think Joseph has a comment.
Yeah, so there's also a disciplinary mechanism, so we don't have the sort of frequent flyers, in addition to what Lori was saying.
Thanks.
We had a question over here?
Yeah, point of clarification, on the TAP ride data, I like the data in the details sheets.
Yes.
Are you combining all the TAP rides together, or are you still segregated? Is it possible to segregate out the TAP rides just for our data?
Yes, we will do that.
Okay, and the other one is, just to let you know, I don't know if I was the only one up here nodding yes that I like the details, but we need that granular detail just so we can make our decisions. So it's not like I want to torture Matt or anything. You know that. So
The
thank you.
data's there. We can certainly pull that out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Lori?
Thanks for listening to all of that.
Thank you. Yes. All right, and I don't believe we have any other business, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.